I've been told that alliteration is forbidden for public speakers, but today we're talking about the painful, purposeful path of the pugilist panda. And I thought about a couple P's later, patient and persistent. So it's the painful, persistent, patient, painful, purposeful path of the pugilist panda. And rules were made to be broken. Chris Booker, I got something special for you today, pal. So, yes. So with this alliteration comes some wonderful panda puns. What's an unhealthy relationship between these two bears called? Codependent. How does he keep his pants up? Suspendas. How does this guy vote? He's an independent. That's exactly right. Well done. And a more serious question is, how does this guy become the dragon warrior? Now, I know you're feeling these puns are unbearable at this point. You might be feeling bamboozled. But how does one turn from kind of a lard to the ultimate kung fu master? And that's what you see in the movie clip, is at the beginning of his journey, when it's possible that he might be the dragon warrior, man, he's pumped, he's ready to go, he's ready to leave his noodle cart behind and go make something happen. But then he finds out it's difficult. He finds out there's some serious challenges along the way to become the dragon warrior. And I'm going to show my hand very early in this sermon today. That's my one point today, and the rest is filler. Is finding your purpose ain't easy. It takes some work. It takes diligence. It takes patience, persistence, some pain, and so forth. It takes being purposeful to find your purpose. You don't just stumble upon it, and it ain't always fun. A lot of times we think finding our purpose means life is just wonderful. And that's kind of the opposite of truth a lot of times. So we're talking about the pillars of Daylight Church, which are service, study, worship, and rest. And now we're on tier 3 of each of these pillars. And so we've talked about kind of a progression you walk down in each of these pillars. And we're talking about service, which is represented by that little crooked pillar over there. But service, at Daylight Church, we provide service projects. We ask people to be involved in service to the church. And we hope that somehow through that, they'll start to develop purpose in their lives. That purpose will be a journey that they walk down. And so service is the topic of the day. Serving others is where it starts, and anyone can do this, believer, non-believer alike. We encourage everyone to serve their fellow human beings. It's kind of a universal truth that it's a good thing to serve others. And so whether you're a Christian or not, we feel like this is a foundational truth that people should consider, is that they should serve others. And then if you are a Christian, then the church is an organization that God seems to be very invested in and very interested in. And so it's important to find a church that you believe in what they're doing and to invest in that church. And then hopefully along that journey you'll find purpose. But finding purpose is really, it's dicey. It's challenging to figure out because there's this cyclical nature when it comes to purpose between who you are and what you do. And what you do influences who you are, and who you are influences what you do, and what you do influences who you are. And so sometimes it's kind of hard to know where to start the discussion on purpose, because we hope that through activity, purpose will rise up in your life. As you do stuff, you'll see, I was made to do stuff. But that doesn't necessarily become your identity. It starts with who you are. This painting was voted the best painting in the UK at one point, and that's a really blurry image, and I apologize for that. It's called The Fighting Temeraire Tugged to Her Last Birth to Be Broken Up, a very long and obnoxious name for a painting, in my opinion. And the voting was actually, in my opinion, kind of uncool, and that there were only 10 paintings to choose from, and that just makes it ridiculous to me. But when we look at a painting like this, and you look at a work of art, what is the purpose of a work of art? Anybody want to just throw something out there?
Express the artist's feelings about something.
It tells you a whole lot about the artist. Anything else? What does a work of art do? It inspires people. Anybody? I heard something over here. What was that?
Captures beauty.
It captures beauty. And so what we find in Scripture is that you are a work of art. We find that here in this passage in Ephesians 2:10. It says, "For we are God's handiwork, created in Christ Jesus to do good works, which God prepared in advance for us to do." And I want to focus on a couple words. It's the word "are" and "handiwork." So the word "are" means now. It means when it says you are God's handiwork, there's no progression there. It's not speaking of something you will become. It's saying right here, right now, in the seat you're sitting in, the popcorn you're chewing on, you are God's handiwork. And in the Greek, this word handiwork is really fascinating. It means craftsmanship. So when you think of a craftsman taking a piece of wood and forming it into molding in a house, and if he did it by hand, it's craftsmanship. It's something that an artist puts personal attention into. And it says you are something God put personal attention into. It says you're a work of art, a masterwork. In some translations, it says you are God's masterpiece. And this word can also be translated as a poem, and some of you are good with that, and some of you that feels kind of funny. But you're a poem of God's. You're an expression of something beautiful, something eloquent, something articulate and incredible. And it says you are these things, not you will be these things, not that that's the goal in life, but you as a human being, a sentient being, capable of care, capable of living in the image of God and making good decisions, you are right here, right now, in the seat you're in. Already you have an incredible purpose. You are to reflect the image of God. You are to inspire. You're to do the things that we talked about that art does. That is who you are now. And then we continue. What we find is that what we do comes from who we are. And so when we find out, when you have this revelation of that I am actually something beautiful, I am actually something special that God invested in and handcrafted, that He was personally involved in developing me, then what you do flows out of that. Your purpose is already in some sense fulfilled, but it's a purpose that's growing and expanding and becoming more and more. And so who you are determines what you do, and then what you do determines who you are in a sense. Who we become is shaped by what we do. And so as you reflect the image of God, as you serve others, as you act like Jesus, then that starts to shape your character. And in some sense, you're no longer trying to do good things. You're no longer serving people out of some sense of duty or diligence, but rather you become a servant. You literally become a servant where service comes naturally to you. When the church says, hey, we have a service project coming up, there's a difference between someone who thinks, well, I better do that because I'm a good Christian and that's what Christians do, and someone who it flows out of them that, yes, here is an opportunity to help and to serve. And so what you do affects who you are, and who you are affects what you do. And it's cyclical. And who are we and what are we supposed to do? In Galatians it says this, it says, God who set me apart from my mother's womb, who knew me from before I was born and called me by His grace, was pleased to reveal His Son in me. It says this is what God wants to do in our lives, is to reveal the Son, Jesus. That's the work of art that you're supposed to be. So when we look at the Mona Lisa, we see that this was an incredible artist. And what this passage is saying is that when people see you, it should be a reflection of the incredible artist who created you. Also says in Galatians, my children, Christ is formed in you. Christ, the anointed one, the Messiah, the King of the world, the conqueror of all, the compassionate one, the one who touched blind eyes and healed them, who touched people with leprosy, and the leprosy went away. It says this Christ is being formed in you. And that's part of that. That's the purpose. Ultimately, transcendently, that's the purpose of life, is that Christ would be in us and people would see a reflection of Christ. But then it comes down to the question, so who's seen The Kid with Bruce Willis? Anybody seen this movie? At some point, so his younger self comes to visit him in this movie, and he's saying, well, do I have a dog? And Bruce says, no, I don't have a dog. Well, what do you do? He says, what do I do? He says, well, I'm a consultant. Well, what does that mean? I consult, okay? And he says, great, I grow up to be a loser that doesn't have a dog. And he looks at his identity as what he does, and we can fall into that trap very easily. And so I want to make it very clear from the get-go today that when we talk about purpose, we're not talking about activity, but activity is shaped by purpose. Activity comes out of who you are. And it is important that we look at the question, what do we do? What is our career? How do I spend my life? What is it? So my friend Chad Everett that talked about finding your green, finding your purpose in life here a couple months ago, he talked about what you do and that it lines up with your passions. It lines up that there's a need, that it lines up with your circumstances and so forth. And all of that is super important where this topic of purpose is concerned. But I want to make sure from the beginning we lay down the foundation of that's not your identity. Purpose and identity are separate. And here's the one point, is that this idea of purpose and what you do unfolding ain't no rom-com. So we have this idea about love, and especially in Western culture, and in a lot of Eastern cultures it's not like this. Sometimes love is a business transaction. But in Western culture, we see these movies and we read the books, and we have this idea that you fall in love, like it's something you trip over and just end up in a hole, the hole of love somewhere. I don't know if that's a good description or not. But it's this idea that if I just go through life long enough, love will grab me. Love will take me. And if love will take me and love will grab me, then everything's going to be great and we can walk off into the sunset together and life will be beautiful. Anyone who has experienced real, intimate, romantic love knows that ain't how it works. And it's never how it works. Which isn't to say that you don't have good stories out there. It isn't to say that people aren't, like these guys practically making out in the seats right here. I mean, I'm not saying there isn't true romance out there, but what I'm saying is, even these guys, she has her head on his shoulders, they obviously love and adore each other. I guarantee there's some friction there every now and then at least. It takes work. There's pain, there's persistence, there's faithfulness, there's diligence, there's this path that you have to walk. And nobody stumbles into purpose like we think you might stumble into being in love. And nobody just gets their purpose. What we hope is that one day we'll wake up and go, I get me now. And that's never going to happen. It's not how purpose unravels in our lives. Purpose is a path that you follow, and it can be a painful path that takes patience and so forth. Long passage here from the Gospel of John, but Jesus says this. He says, truly, truly, I say to you. That's not right. That's mistyped. A grain of wheat falls into the earth and dies, and it remains alone. But if it dies, it bears much fruit. Whoever loves his life loses it, and whoever hates his life in this world will keep it for eternal life. If anyone serves me, he must follow me, and where I am, there will my servant be. If anyone serves me, the Father will honor him. And then he's talking about his death. So he knows, and this is really something to think about with Jesus, is that he knew going into this that he was going to die a horrible death. He alludes to it multiple times throughout the Gospels, that he knew this death on a cross, this horrendous torture death was on the way. And he kept putting one foot in front of the other. He kept moving forward. And this is what he says about that. He says, my soul is troubled. But should I say, Father, save me from this hour? He says, for this purpose I have come to this hour. Father, glorify your name. The purpose of Jesus was not falling in love. It wasn't, wow, I have self-actualized and now all of a sudden I get everything and I've discovered my purpose and my purpose is this. No, it was, I came to die. I came to lay down my life. I came to be tortured. And so any fairy tale that says purpose is just going to fall into your lap and then all the ducks in your life are going to just file into a row is probably a mythology. It's probably a fantasy. And in Christianity, the entire purpose is that you lay down life, that you give up life, that you live the life of the cross, which is a life of crucifixion. It's a torturous life. We have this tendency to think that if everything is easy and I'm moving forward and all the good stuff is happening, well, then I must have found my purpose. Scripture seems to paint exactly the opposite. That if you're trudging along and things are tough and things are hard and sometimes you just don't want to get out of bed, sometimes now your soul is troubled, you may be smack right in the middle of where you're supposed to be. Happiness is no indicator of of purpose being present. Happiness is not the indicator. Sometimes the opposite is true. I was talking to a friend this week about this passage in the Old Testament where Moses went and visited with God, and when he came back down from the mountain, his face was glowing to such an extent that people were afraid, like something really strange was going on. This wasn't a spray tan, this was something crazy going on. And he would wear a veil in order to kind of shield people from the blinding glory of God. And that's what this passage in the New Testament is referring to, is this moment in Moses' life. It says, now we who with unveiled faces all reflect the glory of God are being transformed into his image with intensifying glory. So the purpose is right here. The purpose is that when people see you, they see God. That when people experience your compassion, they're experiencing the compassion of God. When people see your persistence to walk through a painful path, They're seeing the same persistence that God had on the cross. It's that we are to reflect God and that we're supposed to grow in that reflection, that it's supposed to be something that continues to become brighter and brighter in our lives. We've used this slide multiple times in here about Jesus. That people were expecting a particular Messiah when Jesus came. They thought he was going to dominate the Romans and kill their enemies and prove once and for all that Jehovah God was the God and all the other gods were pagan gods. And they wanted a military God that would come in and kick butt and take names. It's not what they got. This is the God that they got. He was the one that healed the sick. He forgave his enemies. He washed people's feet. He took a party with him where he went. He calmed storms. He refused to justify himself when people would tell him he was evil or he was demonic or when they were about to kill him. And I've had, maybe this is a little embarrassing, but I grow a beard. Some of you have probably experienced this. And every now and then that beard gets a curly hair that gets in your nose. Anybody experience this? I see some of the beardly people in here, and it just feels like you got a bug the whole time, and you're going like this. And I'm always asking my wife, like this is so embarrassing. Like on an ear hair, do I tuck or do I pluck? So she'll say, you got a nose hair. And I'll say, well, is it a tucker or a plucker? Meaning, do I kind of just push it up in there and it's going to vanish, or do I need to yank that sucker out? And she's just really honest with me. Well, here's what I know, is when you pluck one, it hurts for days. If you pluck a beard hair, it hurts for days. And this Jesus, they grabbed his beard by the fistfuls and ripped them from his face. And he could have burned them to ash in an instant. And he didn't. He just let them do what they do. He let people be people. Love demands choice. He gave people a choice, and they chose poorly. But even the greatest, most wicked, evil people on earth that were crucifying the Son of God, his words to them were, Father, forgive them. They don't know what they're doing. He wasn't a vengeful, wrathful, angry, rip them up kind of God. He was a God that extended mercy and compassion. And so when we look at what it means for us to reflect the glory of God, that's what it looks like. We take the stripes. We don't have to defend ourselves. We don't have to fight for our rights. We care about people who are hurting. We don't ignore the people who don't look like us. We don't ignore the people that are sick or in prison. We don't ignore people that are impoverished. That's what Jesus looked like. And so when we start talking about purpose, get this. When we talk about purpose, the purpose is to look like Jesus. And to look like Jesus is always to serve. It means this life is not mine. This life is not mine to be grasped, like Philippians says. It says equality with God, being equal with God, was in Jesus' rights. He could burn them to ashes if he wanted to. He could stand up and preach and say, everyone worship me, and they would be forced to lay down and bow to him. But he didn't do that. He became a servant. It says in his very nature, he became a servant. And that's the purpose of mankind. The purpose of mankind is to lay down your life and serve others. So it means walking the rocky path. We think, again, we have this mixed up mythology in our heads that finding purpose will lead to some kind of comfortable self-understanding. That finding purpose will be, we think we found purpose if we can wake up every morning with a smile on our face because of what we're doing. That's not necessarily the reality. What God is calling you to may be very difficult. It's not going to just fall in your lap. You have to be purposeful to find your purpose. And it's not going to be easy. Maybe I'm overstating this today, but it's my one single point is that we think purpose should just fall in our lap and be easy. And it's just not, and it never will be. God's asking you to walk a difficult path. When we look to Jesus, who is the one that we want to be like, we find out that it involves sacrifice. Don Francisco was a Christian hippie in the 70s that did a lot of music. He has a song called He's Alive that was extremely popular in the 70s. And he wrote this song called Love Is Not a Feeling. It says, Jesus didn't die for you because it was fun. He hung there for love because it had to be done. And despite of the anguish, his word was fulfilled. Love is not a feeling. It's an act of your will. We have this tendency to think so emotionally about purpose that we're not willing to get up in the morning when we don't feel like getting up in the morning. We're not willing to call a friend that maybe that relationship is difficult. We're not willing to give up our Friday night to go serve someone who doesn't have a bed to sleep in. That's the kind of stuff that God is calling us to. We look to Jesus, who it says is the author and perfecter of our faith. And it says, for the joy set before him, he endured the cross, scorning its shame. Jesus didn't go, well, I found my purpose. I get to hang on a cross today. That wasn't it at all. He was so upset that he literally sweat blood because he was so in turmoil about what he was about to face. God may be calling you to do something that hurts, that's challenging, you got to binge watch less shows because of what God is calling you to do. You got to get up a little bit earlier because of what God's calling you to do. You got to sacrifice some money or some prestige or the house that you've always dreamed of because of what God's calling you to do. Any message about Jesus that doesn't talk about the cross a little bit has, in some sense, missed the message of Jesus. It does require sacrifice. I've written a couple books and published them, and when you publish books, then all of a sudden every author that you've ever known comes out of the woodwork. And everybody wants to know, how did you do it? And I've got these great book ideas, and I want to write a book. How do I get it published? And how do I get an agent? And how do I do this? And how do I do that? And it's once you've had a book, it doesn't even have to be a good book. You don't even have to be a good writer. But once you have something in print, suddenly you're an expert on this stuff. And I have one piece of advice for potential authors, and it's get your butt in a chair. There's a book out there called Butt in Chair, which is a manual for authors. And it's really shocking that when you get your butt in a chair and you start writing, and then the next day you get your butt in a chair and you start writing, and the next day your butt is in a chair and you're writing, guess what ultimately happens? Anybody want to take a stab? You have a book. But it goes back to get your butt in a chair. People say, well, I have all these great book ideas. Well, good. Sit down and write. Well, how do I know how to be a good writer? Or how do I know that the publisher will pick it up or that my ideas are good? People will find all kinds of reasons to never actually do the work. And whatever God is calling you to do, whatever gifts he's inspired in you and planted in you, it's going to require a get your butt in the chair somehow, some way. You're not going to accidentally end up fulfilling that thing. You're not going to accidentally use the gifts that God's given you. Very often. It's certainly not going to be a lifelong pursuit of purpose if you're not willing to at least get your butt in the chair and do something. Chad shared this passage with us when he was here. He said, each of you should use whatever gift you have received to serve others as faithful stewards of God's grace. So it starts off with each of you. This says, and he's writing to a broad audience. He knew that this book would be read far and wide. And he doesn't say some of you. He doesn't say most of you or a couple of you. He says every single one of you. Everybody that's listening to this message, whether it's online or in this room right now, God has placed some kind of gift in you. He has made you unique. He's made you capable and able to do something that I can't do, that Ernesto can't do. Ernesto can do stuff I can't do. I can do stuff he can't do. We have different spheres of influence, different friendships, different skill sets. But whoever you are, he has given you a gift. Now, what do you do with that gift? It's spelled out right here. You become a good steward of his grace. A steward is like a butler. A steward is one who stands and waits for his master's word and then does what his master says. And it ain't easy being a steward. It'd be much easier to have a different job. It's a hard thing to wake up early and make sure the food is prepped and make sure the table is set and make sure the floors are swept. But that's what stewards do. When they find their purpose, when they become a steward, it involves work. God has planted a gift in you. He has planted something in you that nobody else can do, and the path forward is not easy. But you can do it. It requires patience and diligence and purposefulness and persistence. So at Daylight, when we talk about our pillar and serving others, when we sit down and talk about our activities, so we're going to go do a bingo party at Regis Woods Nursing Home. We're going to go to Dare to Care, and we're going to pack bags of food for kids who don't come up with lunches very easily, and so forth. When we do a retreat for St. Jude's Girls, which is our next upcoming big service project, we do them because they're helpful. We do them because it makes a difference in people's lives, and we do them partially because, this is kind of the mandate of Jesus, is that we give ourselves up for people. But we also do it as a method of discipleship. of making disciples. So when we say, hey, let's go feed the hungry together, it's not just the activity. It's about what happens in us and how we change and how we're transformed when we serve. When we say serve the church, we have needs. We have desperate needs all the time. But it's not just about fulfilling those needs. It's about developing people who give up their lives in service of something bigger than themselves. That's why we do these things. And I believe ultimately that's where we find purpose. So when we talk about each of us having a gift, and it doesn't mean it's easy, it's not even an easy task to figure out what your gift is or what God is calling you to. That's a lifelong pursuit as well. But my challenge to you today is key in on that thing. Say, who am I? What can I do that nobody else can do? And start pursuing that thing, but get your butt in a chair. Do something. Don't just sit around and wait for this thing to fall in your lap. It ain't ever going to happen. You got to move. You got to actually either get off your butt or get on your butt, whichever one is going to help you more in this thing that God's planted in you. But you can't lazy your way through life when it comes to the gifts God's given you. He has planted them in you because they're important. You are an important individual with a gift that God has given you. And I want to challenge you to figure out what are the next steps towards moving towards that gift and actually do them. Stop talking about them. Stop thinking about them and actually get your butt in a chair and do something.